Our scripture passage for today is from 1 Corinthians 13. If I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. If I give away all I have, and if I deliver up my body to be burned, but have not love, I gain nothing. Love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. As for prophecies, they will pass away. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when the perfect comes, the partial will pass away. When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I gave up childish ways. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I have been fully known. So now faith, hope, and love abide, these three, but the greatest of these is love. You can be seated.
Well, good morning. It's good to be here with you. If we've never met, my name is David Black. I'm the campus pastor here, and just want to welcome you to Grace. Something we say here often and mean is that we would rather pursue God together than pretend that we have it all together. And what we mean by that is if you've had a great week, or you're a follower of Jesus and you're like, I'm glad I'm here, we're glad you're here too. And hopefully you connect with someone and enjoy celebrating the week that you had. If you had a not great week, or maybe you're not a follower of Jesus and you're like, I don't know what I think about God, that's kind of why I'm here, we're also glad that you're here too. We don't want to pretend. We just want to literally open up the Bible and see what it has to say. And oftentimes God talks about his heart. He also talks about our heart in that. And we do that in a whole host of different ways. But one of the ways that we do that, not only singing about God's word, but we open it and we read it. And so we have been in a series that we just started last week called Love Is. And when you actually take a minute to think about love, like we did last week, you realize it's everywhere, right? So last week we saw it was in our music, it's in our movies, it's what we use our apps up for, we obsess about it, we talk about it. We love love in our culture. We love the idea of love, we love the messiness of love, of others like love life, right? We like, it's entertainment for us in many places. We love the prospect of love, and yet for many of us, we would say even though we love love, and we hold it at such a high value, it's missing from our life. Maybe it's missing from our marriage. Maybe it's missing from our friendship, missing from my work, missing from my school life. And we just ask this question, like, hey, if it's so important, why is it that love is what's missing? And oftentimes it's even missing from our churches. And one of the reasons we said that I think love is missing is because when it comes to love, we often have a lot of different definitions of it in our own language, in our own head. We have one word for it, but a lot of definitions, and it can be confusing. In fact, sometimes I think kids have a better idea of what love is, and so this week, I kind of ran into this a little bit. Some of this is cute, some of it's disturbing, some of it is pretty profound, but they asked children to define love. What is love? How would you define it? The first one said this, love is when you go out to eat and give somebody most of your French fries without making them give you any of theirs, right? Some of you are in a relationship. and this might be a cry for help. I say, hey, they eat all my food. They say they don't want nothing, and then they just take everything that I eat. And, well, sorry, there you go. Another child says this: love is when you tell a guy you like his shirt and then he wears it every day, right? We're pretty simple, okay? Just tell us you like it. Just want to keep on doing it until you tell us you don't like it. That's how it works. Love is like a little old woman and a little old man who are still friends after they know each other so well. Oh, Tommy, isn't that great? That's excellent. Here's another one. I thought this was interesting. Love is when mommy sees daddy on the toilet and she doesn't think it's gross. I don't know, blame the kids, right? I thought this one was actually pretty profound. Love is what's in the room with you at Christmas if you stop opening presents and listen. Oh, all right, Bobby. Philosopher Bobby. He's got it going on. Kids try their best to define love. Well, we do too, right? And sometimes we say, hey, I love my wife. I love my children. I also love baseball. And I love music. And what we hope is that people understand by the context of our life and maybe by the actions of our life that we mean that differently. Maybe you grew up in a relationship with your parents or with your family, and you're like, love does not mean what I hear other people say it means, because when I examine my life and the interactions that I've had, I come up with a different definition than maybe even a textbook definition. Well, this is where the language that the Bible is written in is helpful. It was written in the Greek language. This isn't a Greek class, so you don't have to remember any of this. But what's helpful is that the Greek language actually has 4 words for love. And we looked at it last week, and we saw that there's friendship love and family love and eros, which is romantic love. And for most of the Greek culture, eros was the #1 word that they used for love. It was mostly viewed romantically. So when they said love, they meant, like relationships and passion and dating and all of that. And that's what they aspired to. But we said last week, something happened historically. So this isn't the Bible. You can go look this up in history. For most of the Greek culture, eros was the word they used. It was the definition for love. And then there was this other little tiny word called agape. And they didn't use it that much, but after something happened, after Jesus, after the resurrection, after the cross, after this little tiny ragtag group of people called the church happened, the entire Roman world, Greek-speaking Roman world, changed the word that they used for love. In fact, the definition for love changed across the culture, not only for them, but actually the love that we talk about today is informed very much by this thing that happened, and it's this word, agape. And agape is a commitment that ascribes worth to someone else at the cost of oneself. It's the love that we read about today. And so for an entire generation of people, families upon families, love had been defined one way, and suddenly it was defined differently. And so I think the question for you and I, and the question that we're asking this entire series, is really this: can that happen again? Is there a love better than this? In other words, is there a love better than the one that I might have experienced growing up? Is there a love better than the one that I hear talked about or sung about on the radio or on TV? Is there a love that is better than the one that all the apps provide me, or that I hope the other person gives to me? Is there a love? Paul, a guy who's an early missionary of the early church, writes to a really impressive church in 1 Corinthians 13. These guys are talented. They're well-spoken. They have charismatic, we would call them celebrity leaders, and they were arguing a little bit over that. I know we don't know anything about that in our culture today. They would also have said that they were given talented musicians. Their worship music was off the charts. Their education was over the top. Their eloquence was just famous, and they had charismatic leaders that people followed and argued over about who was better. And yet, Paul goes, you know what's not impressive? Your love. It's not impressive. And last week, we said that what Paul basically tried to get across to you and me is that love is essential. And here he said this. He said, life that lacks love will always be noisy, shallow, and empty. Because if you find your marriage noisy, shallow, and empty, and if you find your world noisy, shallow, and empty, and if you feel like your place of employment is noisy, shallow, and empty, it could be that has yet to see a love that is like agape, a love like the one that he talks about. And today, we're going to continue in that conversation and find out a little bit more. In fact, the section of Scripture that we're doing is real short, but it packs a giant punch. Here's what it is. It says, love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. I don't know if you live around here, this makes sense. If not, you'll just have to trust me. There's an intersection up here at Barrett Parkway and 75. And when you get off the intersection, it can be a little bit confusing. And so more than once, I've been sitting in a vehicle at a light on a divided 4-lane highway and watch a car come off the interstate and turn into oncoming traffic. Yeah, it's not great. And I don't know about you, but if you ever experienced that, you have a couple thoughts. Like, at first you're like, all right, what are we doing? Right? That's the first one. Or like, are you kidding me? Or, okay. Or like, who's driving this vehicle? Is it driving itself? Right? Like, all these questions. It's coming at you. And at first, it's a little confusing and disorienting. And then the more you start to think, you're like, how long is this going to go for? Like, how do we get out of this? Because there's no turnaround on a 4-lane divided highway. Like, what's the plan? You're just kind of looking at each other if you're at a standstill. And worse, if it's moving, you're thinking, oh my goodness, that person's going to collide with someone else. They're going to cause injury to somebody else. It's going to be bad. And so we think everything from, oh, this is amusing, to comical, to dangerous, to actually people getting hurt. When I think about that, I think about this verse, because here's what happens. The same thing is true when we make the mistake that love is about me. You see, when we make love about me, what we're saying is that we're trying to take something that was made to go one way and drive it the opposite direction. And when we do that, people get hurt. It's dangerous. It gets messy. Some of us have been in collisions because someone else made love about them, or we ourselves made love about me. And Paul is writing to you and me in the Bible, and God wants us to know that the type of love that he's talking about is this: a love that is others-focused. Love is others-focused. Now, that might be obvious to you. You might be oblivious to that, and you're like, okay, I'm glad we're here. Some of you might have people in mind that you're like going, oh, I wish they were here today. Right? But here's what I'm kind of praying for and what I've been thinking about all week, and here's kind of what I hope would happen today as we just look a little bit further into this. I think there's the potential that as we talk about love being others-focused, that there might be areas, especially if you're a follower of Jesus, there might be areas in your life where you're going, God, I really have been praying that you would fix that relationship with that person in my life. God, I've been praying that you could help that person change. Or maybe you're in a neighborhood and you're like, I've been praying for my neighborhood. I've just been praying that the culture would change, that people would just like know each other. Or maybe there's a difficult person. Maybe it's your boss. Maybe it's a spouse. Maybe it's a friend of a friend or someone on the edge of your peer group where you're like, man, it's just difficult. And I've been praying that God would change that circumstance, change that person, or just do something about it. And here's why I think this is so important, because it's entirely possible that the change that we're praying for God to do out there, he may want to actually start with us in here. You ever thought about that? Because most of the time I'm saying, God, change that person. And he may go, all right, but that's going to require me to begin inside of you. That's what Paul's trying to get at. So when we say that love is others-focused, we're just going to take the rest of our time and kind of poke around in these verses and see if we can't learn a little bit more about what he means. I wrote this down this week. When we say that love is others-focused, here's what we're saying. Others are the other side to love. So think about that. We think about love, and we love the idea of love. We love the feeling of love. We love the fact of love. Do you know what is hard to love? The face of love, the other person. Because on the other side of a love is someone else. That's how it works. It's like, hey, I want to be in love, and there is an other on the other side that we typically have an idealized picture or imagination for. Right? And what's fascinating is when you look at this verse, all of the things that Paul lists here are only possible with other people. So he says love is patient, it's kind, right? It does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude or insist on its own way. All those underlying words are only possible when there's someone else on the other side of that, right? So like the only way I'm patient is if there's another that I have to be patient with. The only way I can be kind is if there's someone else to be kind to. The only way that love is not envious or boasting is because there's someone else there with which I'm not being arrogant towards or insisting my own way, right? The only time I get my own way all the time is when I'm by myself. That's how that works. And so I just thought maybe we could unpack a little bit about what he's saying here when he talks about these words. The word patient, again, you don't have to remember all this, but it comes from a word that combines two words. One is long or big, and the other one is explode. So long time before explode, a long fuse. That's how we talk about it, right? Patience could be called an Old English word, long suffering. And so patience is looking at someone else and saying, it's going to take me a long time before I lose it, before I go off, before my life boils over, right? Patience is oftentimes about extending and seeking understanding from somebody else. And sometimes it means enduring some suffering. Sometimes, it could be extreme, but most of the time the suffering we're talking about is like listening to them drone on and on and on and on and on. Or maybe they're doing that thing again. Or maybe that person's just making that noise, or they're just there again. Or you're trying to focus on something else, and they are like, we'll use the words like, this is killing me, right? This is killing me. It's the idea of enduring a long time with someone else. Kindness is actually helpfulness or usefulness. It's actually love in action. And so kindness, when you look at the word, is not a sentiment. It's actually acting on it. Sometimes if you meet someone who has a mullet, I know they're kind of coming back around. There's a phrase about mullets that maybe you've heard. It is, business in the front and party in the back. That's right. Love is similar, right? There's a party part to love. Kindness is the business part to love, right? It's the front. It's the part that's going to extend useful help to someone else. And we all love that, except that this kindness word carries with it this idea of being kind and useful and helpful without recognition or being repaid. Ooh, I don't know about that. Kindness is a part of loving others. He continues on, and he goes, not only kindness, but envy. So when you look at the word envy, the word there is jealous or passionate, but it's a jealousy that looks at what someone else has and says, because you have that and I don't, I cannot be happy. Or they say, because you have that and I don't, you cannot be happy. I want you to lose it. And so it's looking at somebody else and going, I have to have that for my happiness, or you have to lose that for my happiness. Jealousy hates when someone else is in the spotlight. Can't stand it. Again, so when see someone being praised, or someone else's kids getting ahead, or they get the trophy, or they're the ones being talked about, or that's the car that they drive, or that's the house that they have, or that's the life that they have, or the vacation that they went on, or the clothes that they buy, or the thing that we see on social media, and we go, I want that. It's not fair that they have that and I don't. Why don't I have that thing? That's jealousy. It's jealousy. Keep going. The word boast literally means a parade, right? Which is hilarious to me. Because the next time you hear someone boasting and you kind of get mad about it, just think of like a parade. Like think of them just throwing their own little parade, like confetti and playing a horn. I don't know why it's playing a horn and walking down the street. Like they're doing the thing for themselves. Boasting is always putting its resume out there. It's always self-recommending. It's like going online on Amazon and you're like, oh, this book has 5 stars and 100 reviews, and they're all the author. You're going, Okay. It makes those 5 stars look different, right? Boast is always, hey, 5 stars, 100 reviews, it's all me, right? They're always recommending themselves. They're always padding their resume. They're putting it out in front and going, you need this. And so jealousy is like, I don't have. Boasting is obsessing with what I do have, right? In front of other people. He continues on. He goes, look, arrogant. The word arrogant we'll talk about in a little bit more, but it actually means inflated. And they have an inflated view of themselves. Like they're kind of full of it. That's another word that we would use, right? Rude literally means to injure. Again, it's the opposite of kindness. It's the action part of it, where someone else is run over. That's the way we might put it. Run over, right? Seeking your own way, I think that makes sense to us. But in that person's life, they are the priority. Now, think about those things. They're probably not surprising to you. You could probably come up with that list. Like if we went to a kindergarten class and said, what does it mean to be loving? Those kids would come up with a few of those things. But notice, all of those things are a life and a love that is oriented around others. It's oriented around others. In the early years of science and astronomy, it was often believed that the Earth was the center of our solar system, and that all of the planets and all of the suns revolved around that until this guy named Copernicus, which we always use sarcastically now. How would you like to be a scientist who like fundamentally changes the way we think about the universe? And everyone goes like, who are you, Copernicus? You know, like that's what we think now. Copernicus comes along with something that's a fancy word called a heliocentric model, which is what if the sun is actually the center of our solar system? To which one scientist said this at the time, this quote, by foolish effort, Copernicus tried to revive the weak Pythagorean opinion long ago deservedly destroyed, since it is expressly contrary to human reason. Right? Copernicus is like, hey guys, the sun's the center of the solar system. And they're like, that old thing again? I think we've proven that that's not really what it is, right? Why do I bring that up? Because when we talk about a love that is others-centered, I think sometimes we think we're just talking about, I need to improve an area in my life. I just need a tune-up. That's all I need. But what the Bible is talking about, what God is talking about, what Paul is writing is this. He's like, you need a fundamental change to the way that you look at the universe of love. It's got to be a shift. Now, we're not just simply talking about cleaning up a few areas. Now, that might seem obvious to us, but oftentimes the opposite is true. Like, come on, man, I know that other people matter. I know that love is about others. Like, why are you hammering this so much? Here, look, let me just ask. If you know that love is others-oriented, why do you constantly measure love by how they make you feel or what they're giving back to you? Like, I know this, just not as a pastor, as a person, because I do it too. Right? We evaluate our relationships by how much love is coming our way or the feelings that we get, right? But instead, Paul's going, no. If you want to evaluate your relationship, if you want to evaluate love, measure it by how the other person feels about you. Measure it about their interaction of you. Take me out of the center of your universe and begin to look at things differently. Listen, writing about this in another section, Paul would tell us this is the way that God thinks. Romans 12:10 says this, be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. There's 40 one another's in the New Testament that God calls us to. 40 times these type of commands. What is God saying? What do you think he's trying to get across? He's going, in my world, in my universe, in fact, in the world and the universe in which you were created to live, for it to function properly, it does not function properly if you're living in a model with you at the center. You got to look at it differently. And so we'll make fun of flat earthers all day, right? We're like, and if you're here, you're welcome here, and we're very understanding, and we're glad you're here. But we may not take you seriously sometimes. But we'll questioningly go like, oh, how can anyone believe in flat earth? And yet, we'll pursue a self-centered love. Why is that? It's because we fail to realize that the way that we're viewing the universe and the world is backwards. I think we have to get our minds around what Jonathan Edwards talks about. An old preacher says it and puts it this way: love is putting your happiness in the happiness of the other one. It's like, oh, I am actually loving not when they make me feel happy, but when I actually see happiness produced in them out of the relationship that I've been called to interact with. We've got to ask this question of ourselves: does my love make room for others? Is that even in my universe, as we might say it? Is that the model that I'm actually operating off of? Listen, I hinted at it earlier, but notice, again, when is it the most easy to be patient? When I'm by myself. I got patience for days when it's just me. Listen, when is it not even a task to be kind? When I'm alone. Man, if no one's around, I'm the most patient, most kind. You're like, not the humblest, right? Most like, when do I not have to worry about running people over or being rude? When they're not there, right? Here's why this is important. Because here's what I found to be true about me. It is always easier to remove the others out of the equation than to remove the self out of my heart, right? We do that all the time. That person's bothering me. I don't have the patience. You know what I'm going to do? I could work on the selfishness in my life, or I could just remove them. Let's remove them, right? That's what we do. And so we distance ourselves, or we hide and block that person, or we ghost that person, or we just don't return their text. You know, it could go on and on. We've got all these ways of doing it in our culture. Because why? Because we know we're better when we're alone in that way. Because I don't want to be confronted by the selfishness that's in me, that when it comes up, I go, you're gone, and I'm better. I feel better suddenly. Look at this. The sun's out again. You know, that's how we think about it in our culture. Because here's what you know is true, and here's what the Bible would even say. That not only are others the other side to love, when we talk about love being others-centric, here's what Paul's almost recognizing, and the reason he has to say this is because others are the hardest side to love. They're the hardest. Like, we're doing good if they're not involved. In fact, if you were to take a look at this section in 1 Corinthians, when he's talking about all of these things that love is and is not, if you were to go back in the previous sections of the letter, here's what you'd find out. All those words were used of the Corinthian church in positive and negative ways. So here's what he's basically saying to them. Love is a lot of things. You know what else it isn't? Love is not you. Right? If we universally all would sit here and go, that's what we know, love is other-centered, that's what we're aiming at, that's what we want, then why is it not natural for us? Why can none of us do it? Why is that a big deal to you and to me? Well, I think Paul gives us a clue in this word here, arrogant. I told you we'd come back to it for a second. But the word arrogant there is really interesting. It's only used in 2 parts of the New Testament. So there's a lot of words in the Bible. This word only shows up 2 times. And it's a word that only Paul uses. It's one of his favorite words to talk about kind of self. And it's the word that means inflated or like puffed up. So think of a puffer fish, like, whoop, you know, for protection. Or actually maybe think about a balloon that's just full of like hot air or helium. It's actually, this is gross, but it's actually used in the Greek language to refer to organs that are gaseous and distended. And you're like, ugh, that's gross, right? But that's the word he's using. And why I think that is helpful and why I think that's so insightful is because when you think about something that's inflated, it looks full, but it's really what? Empty. It's empty. It's like a chip bag, right? You know this when you buy chips. The size of the bag is not the amount of chips that you're getting, right? Every time, in fact, you open it, and I don't know what air they're putting in there with the potatoes. It always stinks, right? You're like, that's the least appetizing smell. But like, you open up the bag, and you look in, and you're going, oh, that's what I got? How much? This was $5, right? And so the amount of air, if you live long enough, the amount of air just keeps getting bigger and the amount of chips getting littler. And eventually, I think we're just going to sell one chip per bag. That'll be the deal. You open it up and go, there it is. Throw away the bag. But the same thing is true with our ego, right? An ego that is empty is inflated. An ego that's inflated is empty. And so what that means is, and how that plays out is this, that when we think about our ego or our pride being puffed up, we often think about it and we say this, we say, oh, that person, he or she is full of themselves. And I know what you mean, because I think we kind of understand this idea of being inflated. You say, oh, they're full of themselves. But really what Paul is driving at, and really what we ought to be saying is this, oh, pride is not someone who's just full of themselves. Pride is someone who is seeking to fill themselves, right? Isn't that what it is? Hey, it needs to be about me because I'm empty inside, and so I'm going to look at somebody else in my life and say, I need you to fill me. So I need your relationship, I need your love, I need your approval. I need to make myself look worth it because I'm empty and I'm hollow and I'm hoping that you could fill it. That's why we look at our jobs and we say that job's going to fulfill me. Or we look at finances, that's going to fulfill me. Or finally, I've found someone who appreciates me for who I really am. And I can finally be all who I was meant to be because that relationship is now going to fill my life. Right? We take our self-interest and we kind of dress it up in our culture today, and we call it love, but really oftentimes it's just someone seeking to be filled. And so if I'm seeking to be filled and you're not filling me, guess what I'm going to do? I'm not going to be patient, right? If I'm seeking to be filled, if I feel like I'm empty inside and you're in the way, I'm not going to be kind. I'm going to just constantly look to you and say, you exist for my happiness. In fact, thinking about love in a way that is opposite of this requires us to go against a lot of what our heart tells us and a lot of what our culture tells us and what your friends and peers probably tell you too. Because unfortunately, when we talk about love in our modern world, here's what we often mean, whether we say it out loud or say it in here. When I talk about modern love, much of modern love is this: your life for me. So I'm glad I finally found you because your life is for me. So I want to get married to someone in hopes that they would bring happiness and wholeness to me. They exist for me. And some of the problem is when they don't exist for me, then I got a problem. So we look at others and we evaluate and say, what are you bringing to the table? What are you carrying with you? And then we get really surprised when they're carrying stuff with them. And we go, what is this you brought to the table, right? This isn't what I was thinking, because this doesn't complete me, fill me, make me whole. We're constantly going, why don't you bring something and give it to me? Whether it's our church, our community, our friends, our work, our marriage, our dating life, our kids. It goes on and on and on and on. Writing about this new type of love, a professor of Yale puts it this way. She says, this Love 2.0 in her book, love is not exclusive. Love's timescale is far shorter than we typically think. Love, as you'll see, is not lasting. And perhaps most challenging of all, love is not unconditional. She's kind of taking this realist approach and going, look, guys, we have to just own up to the fact that love is not what it's cracked up to be. She's saying we just need to change our expectations. In fact, love is often about what you're bringing to the table. Love is really about your life for me. So we might as well just own it and might as well just accept it. But here's why I think this is so important and why it matters that we recognize that most of our love, what we call love, is self-seeking at times, is because a love that's looking to be filled will always be lacking. It'll always be lacking. In other words, if you're evaluating love off of what the other person's life brings to you, it will always lack, right? Think about the love that we extend to others, okay? I know this is not fun. I'm not asking you to do it out loud, maybe in your head. Think about the love that you extend to others. We would look at this and think we'd all have this conversation that we're having. And I think most of us, if you're like me, you're sitting there and you're going, oh, I get this. Just look at the circle of maybe my marriage or my family or my kids. And what's interesting is most people, whether you're a follower of Jesus or not, okay, I don't think you have to follow Jesus to look at someone's close circle of relationships and go, oh, they're loving. In fact, most of the time, when you compare them, they look similar side by side. Most of us, we were going around the room and we just said, look at your first circle of relationships. We'd all go, yeah, we do a fairly good job of loving others. Right? And then if you go out one more, maybe extended friends, you go, oh yeah, I'm doing pretty good. You see, we all look similar up front. What you have to do is go further out. And here's what happens. When you talk about the love that you extend to others, it's really good in the first few circles. But if we were to go out further and further and further, here's what I find. Much of what I call love is just tolerance. It's just tolerance. I'll tolerate you, right? Because that person in the line in front of me who's taken 10 minutes on their Starbucks order, right? I'm like, can we get moving? They're not bringing anything to the table. In fact, they're taken from me, right? And so oftentimes I'm quick to extend love to those in my life with whom I have a close relationship. But when it comes to people who will cost me, who I don't know, and they're further out, oh man, that gets harder. What Jesus talks about is a love that extends real love, selfless love, other-centered love to the furthest circles of any relationship, even our enemies. That's crazy. That's unheard of, right? He puts it this way in Matthew 5. He says, for if you love those who love you, that's what we're talking about, right? What reward do you have? Do not even the tax collectors do the same thing? And if you greet only your brothers, what more are you doing than others? Do not even the Gentiles do the same? He'll go on to say, but I tell you, love your enemies and do good to those who persecute you. What's he saying? He's saying as long as you have a love that seeks to be filled by someone else, it will be lacking because you'll find out really quick that your enemy has nothing to give you that will benefit you. In fact, the opposite will happen. They'll cost you. They'll take from you. And we'll talk about this next week, but when it comes to love, we're too poor. We're bankrupt. Think about the love that not only we extend to others, think about the love that we experience from others. I think most of us, if you were to ask us, we would say that we want a love from someone who loves us just because, right? If you're in a relationship and your significant other looks at you and says, why do you love me? That's a trap, okay? Because if you answer, because you're beautiful, what have you just said? That the minute you're not beautiful, that's up for grabs, right? Well, because you make a lot of money. Well, I better keep making a lot of money, right? Well, because you're funny, okay? Gotta be funny, right? You're doing the checklist in your head. The right answer, you know the right answer if you've been married for a long time. And if you've not, here's the right answer. Just cause. I don't know, I just do, right? It's not a lame answer, right? The truth is, that's the answer that we all long to hear. Because for most of us, the love that we experience from others in our life is not a one relationship where someone looks at us and we look at them and go, why do you love me? For most of us, the relationships that we experience in life are little tiny ones. And for most of us, the little tiny relationships that we have, they disciple us and they instruct us that the reason we're loved is because of something that we can give in return. And I'm not blaming school for this, but we go to school, and if you get good grades, you're valuable, you're worth. We go to work, and if we do well in work and people like us, oh. If you can make people laugh, suddenly you have something to offer them. And for many of us, that's why we make them laugh. Right? Or maybe if you're really good and talented. Or maybe if you're just quiet and not in the way. Right? See how that works? Our work environments, honestly, our employment environments, the things that we watch on TV, the stuff that comes through our phone, all of that disciples us in a relationship that says love is what the other person can give to you and you can give back to them. But that's not the way that God talks about love. In fact, in Deuteronomy chapter 7, yes, even in the Old Testament, he looks at the children of Israel and he's like, hey, don't think I love you because you're pretty, because you're not. That's what he says. He says this, the Lord did not set his heart on you and choose you because you were more numerous than the other nations. For you were the smallest of all the nations. Rather, what does it say? It was simply that the Lord loves you. Now, think about this. If this is the type of love that we extend to other people, the love that says, you exist for me, the furthest reaches, we struggle with that. And if the love that we've experienced from others most of our life tells us the same thing, why in the world are we so disappointed when we don't get a different type of love? Why, when we're in a relationship that ends badly or that operates on that, do we go, man, this is not what I expected what would happen? Why do we go, oh, I was actually hoping that this wouldn't be a love where you get stuff from me and I get stuff from you, and that's why we're valuable? Because all of everything else we just talked about would tell us that's what it is. Why are we disappointed? Now, if you live long enough, people will go, that's just the way the world is. If you've got like a cranky uncle or grandma who's like, meh, it's because they've bought into the fact that that's the way it is. That's the way it's always going to be. The quicker you get used to it, right? If you believe that that's really what love is, this endless cycle of finding someone to fill you up that can't do that, right? It will make you hard. It'll make you angry. It'll make you bitter. It'll make you cold. And the world will just throw another carrot out there. Now this is the real love. Now this is the real love. And you'll get tired and angry and alone. But what if what you expected was actually real? What if that longing that you have, and what if that desire that you have for a love that's just because love, for a love that's free to love you out of a fullness, not from what you hope to get, or a love that has nothing to prove, right? What if that was actually available? Well, then you're not crazy, right? Then your disappointment actually is legit. Then you have a reason to be upset when it's not what you expected it would be. See, even in our disappointment, our life and our heart is telling us that there has to be a different type of love. Where does that come from? Is it because you've observed humans and you're like, oh, humans are so loving to each other all the time, there has to be this thing? No. You watch humans and you're like, we're horrible, right? Is it because of history? Because the history of the world is just people loving each other. Right? You can't look at the 20th century and go, oh, yeah, I think after looking at both world wars and 100 other atrocities, there is a love that exists that's free and doesn't have anything to prove. No, we'd go, what are we doing? Science doesn't teach you this. You look at nature and you see some parent eating its child and you're like, that is good. And people are like, that's nature. Right? Where does it come from? Why do we have it? And why do we think that it exists? Because no matter which way you slice it, it's this, that when we talk about loves being others focused, it's not just others are on the other side of love. It's not that they're the hardest side to love. When it comes down to it, what the Bible's going to tell you and me is that we are on the other side of love. That humanity only knows this because there is a God who seeks to make it known. Notice he writes, he goes, love is patient. Love is kind. Isn't it interesting he doesn't say love is being kind? Love is being patient. Love is not being rude. What is he doing? He puts love almost in a personification, right? And the reason that he does that is because what he's trying to get across to you and me is that this is not a checklist to perform. He's not looking at you and go, you know what you can learn from this? Make yourself a little bit more patient, make yourself a little bit more kind, you'll be good. What he's saying is that this is actually a person that you need. And to be honest, you've probably known that your whole life. That there is someone who is patient, someone who is kind, someone who always does not envy, who is not arrogant, who is not rude, who does not boast. There is someone who never seeks their own way, and that person loves you. Really? Yeah. You could go back and you could put Christ, Jesus, God's name in for love, and every one of these things is true. In fact, writing about this, the Apostle Paul, same guy, writes to an Ephesian church, and he's like, here's what I would pray for you. He doesn't pray that they'd be smarter, wiser, know all about the Bible. Look at what he says. I pray that you may have the power, together with all the Lord's people, to grasp, that means get your hands around, how wide, how long, how high and deep is what? The agape love of Christ. And to know this love that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled, not empty, filled to the measure of all the fullness of God. You see, you will never extend this type of love to somebody else unless you've experienced it yourself. There's no way you can do that. No way. I think you know this, and I don't know how long this game is going to live with technology, but we all know the game telephone, right? You played it when you were in kindergarten, probably. It's where somebody passes a message along to someone else, and they do it by whispering in their ear. And this works. It always works. Because people are bad at hearing things and passing it on, right? We're really bad at communication. And so we do this to demonstrate how bad we are at it. And so you start off with a message like, I have a box of cookies, and by the time you get to the end, it's like ants in my pants, right? And you're like, you suddenly look at your friends with disdain. You're like, ugh, like what? How did you do that, right? And there's always that one person who just didn't hear it at all. And so they're like, what do I want to make it, right? Or if you hear it not quietly, as you can only what? You can only repeat to the person what you think you heard. The same thing is true with love. Listen, you cannot give love to another that you have not heard or understood for yourself. You can't pass it on. And that's why when you step into a marriage and you get some message of love from your family, and now you're trying to be married, and you go, I don't know what was said, and I'm not really sure what to say. Right? That's why we get involved in church, and we're like, this is messy, right? And what the Bible would say is not that you need to go back to grade school. It's that you need to return to the source. You need to lean into the original understanding of the one who gives love. That there is a love that is not seeking to be filled, but there's a love that is self-emptying for you and me, right? Literally, for God so loved the world that he gave. He emptied himself at cost to him for you and for me. Agape doesn't say your life for me. Do you know what Jesus says? The God of the Bible says, my life for you. My life for you. And so as the band comes up, I think for a moment there might be some of us in this room who go, I don't really understand that. Maybe I've never really understood that. And our world will look at you and they will tell you this. This is the message you will get as soon as you walk out this door. And it's not because it's evil and wicked. It's because we are blind and lost. And the message is this. You deserve love. Find the love that you deserve. Do you realize that the God of the Bible does not talk about a love you deserve? The God of the Bible says there is a love that you do not deserve extended to you and me. That is in spite of your record, in spite of your sin, in spite of your ugliness, there is a just because love. There is a not seeking its own way love. There is a patient love. There is a helpful and useful love. There is a love that seeks to empty itself into your life. If you would say yes to it. You see, you and I will never, ever say yes to the love of others or love for others. Can't do that, right? There's people in our life who are like, man, I got to say yes to love you. That's impossible if you've never said yes to the love that God extends to you. And so maybe for you, today is the day where you actually understand that for the first time. And I would invite you maybe today just to say yes to his love for you. God is not running out of time. He's not sitting up there going, man, why don't you just get it together? He's patient. The Bible says he's patient, desiring all people to come to him. He's not going, is it really worth it? He's already decided it was not worth it and did it. Right? For you. At his cost of his life. Some of us are here and we're empty. We're not just empty, we're hurt. And the reason it's hard to love is because we're really just preoccupied with the loudest thing in our life at the time, and that's the hurt that we have. And so we're looking for someone to heal that. And when we don't get it, we're rude or we're short-tempered. It's just like any injury, right? It's going to just yell at you the whole time. I'm hurt, I'm hurt, I'm hurt, I'm hurt. Nobody's going to be able to heal that. No person, right? No thing, no drug, no time, no job, no amount of money. And maybe for you, you bring your hurt heart this morning to the God of the universe and go, this is what I have, can you help? And he says, yeah, I can. For some of us, maybe you're a follower of Jesus. Maybe you know the love that he has for you, and it's just hard to believe it. And for you, the struggle is not understanding his love. Maybe for you, the struggle is like actually saying yes to somebody in your life who's just hard to love. And so for you, here's what I would say. Maybe the message of today about love being others-focused is that the temptation for you is to drive you back into self, right? You're just with that other person, and they're hard to love, and what it does is it drives you back into the self. You're like, man, I don't deserve this. I deserve better. Man, they're always taking, right? Would you let it drive you back into the love of Jesus today? Deeper into that, so that we might understand with all of us together. Look, can you imagine a church that is full, not in the seats, but people in whom they are not empty because they've been filled with the love of God? The Bible calls it a fruit, so full that it overflows into others, so that the very definition of love itself changes. You're like, that's impossible. Man, it's happened. It's happened in history. And it can happen again. So Jesus, we just pray this morning that you would help us know the love of God, which you have for us in Christ. Lord, we ask that you would change our hearts, that those who come in hurting and empty might find the fullness found in you through your death and sacrifice. Would they say yes to you maybe for the first time? Or for those of us who need help and healing and are driven back into our selfish lives, God, would you show us that we're going the wrong way down a street and actually turn us around, and that we run to your love this morning to be filled. And as we go to sing, if you need prayer, we don't want you to be alone. There'll be a prayer team available to your left, to the right of the stage. Whether you're carrying something or need to talk to someone, we'd love to do that with you this morning.